Now sometimes we won't be given the midpoint. We will actually be given an endpoint and the midpoint. So here's an example. Let's say I have line segment ST, and I know S is at -3, 4. I know that the midpoint of this segment is at -2, 7. So how do I find T? So now I'm not given the two endpoints. I'm given one endpoint and the middle point. So if I were to actually draw this out, and you always draw pictures, it makes it so much easier. I should look like S and T. M is here in the middle, okay? S is at -3, 4. M is at -2, 7. But we don't know where T is located. So I'm going to show you two different ways to solve it. Okay? The first way, formula free. Let's use logic. All right, we've got our 3 points. I'm going to stack them here. I know that I went from -3, 4, which is S, and then in the middle, I've got -2, 7, which is my midpoint. And then for T, I don't know what I have yet. I'm looking for T. So let's look at this. You know the midpoint is halfway in between, so we know that property. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at the x's. Remember, this is your x and this is your y. How did I get from S to M? How did I get from -3 to -2? I added 1, right? So if this is 1 unit away and M is exactly in the middle, that means T has to be 1 unit away from M. So I'm going to add 1 again, and that puts me at -1. So this is the -1 for the coordinates of T. So now we're going to look at the y coordinates. How did I get from 4 to 7? 4 to 7 is +3, okay? So to get from 7 to the next one, I'm going to add 3 again because it's the midpoint. It's right in the middle. So that means this has got to be 10. Therefore, T is at -1, 10. Now that's one way to do it. That's using logic, knowing what halfway from one point to the other. Sorry, had a couple of messages pop up here on my phone during my video. So we've got SM and MT, M in the middle. Now let's use, for this one, let's use the midpoint formula. It's a little more complicated, but it helps you out when you have variables. So we know that our midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So I know that this will actually give me the midpoint of the x-coordinate for the midpoint and the y-coordinate for the midpoint. Well, what do I already know the coordinates of the midpoint are? I already know my midpoint's at -2, 7. So I already know what the end result is going to be when I do my two averages. So let's do the two averages. All right, so using the midpoint formula, I'm going to take my two x's, which are -3, and we don't know this. Remember, we just found this. We're going to assume we don't know this yet. So T is just xy. So I'm going to do -3 plus x, which are my two x coordinates, divided by 2, and I know that that should give me what? -2. Because I know that when I find the average of my two x's, I came out with -2. I know S's x coordinate, I don't know T's. Okay, remember, assume we haven't done this yet. Assume we didn't do this part. This is a different way to solve it. So I'm going to solve this. Now to get rid of the denominator, what we're going to have to do is we multiply the entire equation by the denominator. So you multiply by 2. When I do this, that cancels out the denominator here. So I'm left with -3 plus x. And then I still have to multiply this also by the -2, which gives me -4. And then to solve this, okay, To solve this, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And so x equals -1. Now I want you to look. What did we get up here? We got -1. Okay? That's where we got this. It's the same thing, except I'm just setting these equal. Let's do the same thing for y. So now if I want to solve for y, I know that the average of the y's divided by 2 is going to give me 7. So my two y's are 4 and y. Remember, we don't know this one yet. 4 plus y divided by 2 is going to give me 7. I'm going to follow the same process. I want to get rid of the denominator. So I'm going to multiply everything through by 2. So when I multiply 2 times this, the denominator goes away. It leaves me with 4 plus y. And 2 times 7 is 14. Then for my last step, I'm going to move the 4 to the other side. So y equals 10. And again, where do you recognize that from? Right there. So that's 2 different methods of finding an endpoint when you know one endpoint and the midpoint. You can either use the midpoint formula, knowing that this has to equal this, and knowing that this has to equal this, and you already know those values, or you can set it up in a row or in a column and reason it out using distances between the points themselves.